So here we are, Sam Miller. We're so glad to have you. Just a little
Welcome, Sam.
background. Sam, I found through our mutual friend Mary, who was also adopted, and I'm imagining we'll have Mary on the show one day. Um, but Sam, what makes you unique, at least so far in our podcast history, is that you did not correct me if I'm wrong, you did not find out you were adopted until several years ago, just a few years ago. Is that correct?
That's right. I found out I was adopted in 2014.
Wow. How did that come about?
Well, I have a genetic kidney condition, and I'd been in a study at Mayo Clinic for many years testing a drug. And my mother had already passed away, and dad before her. And I'm at Mayo Clinic, really, really sick with some side effects. So I tracked down a distant relative who I hadn't seen in 40 years and asked her, hey, so I know this came from your side of the family. Would you please share with me, how your mother dealt with these side effects? Did she have these? And her response was, you mean that horrible bitch knew you would need a body part one day, but she didn't tell you you're adopted?
Oh my goodness.
So
Wow.
that's how I
Wow.
found out.
Wow. That's so okay. So backtrack a little. The
Yeah.
family, some of the family then knows you're adopted. No one spilled the beans along the way.
Yeah. So the way that she described it, because at the time I hadn't used DNA to figure out who I was, because I have multiple fake birth certificates. Not one is authentic, including the fake one at the
And you
hospital.
you knew that when you were
No,
no. Okay.
no, I knew my mother had lied about her name, but I didn't know she wasn't my mother either.
Oh my
You
God.
know, um, but the way she knew I was adopted was the family never really talked about it, because I'm sure at some point in these podcasts it's going to come up that my generation felt that being adopted was somewhat of a shame, or that you were
Mhm.
tarnished or dirty or unwanted and that kind of thing. So that was probably part of my mother's motivation. Um, but what was the question again? It was um,
How did you like figure out
Did no,
that?
it
Yeah.
was did your family, everyone in your family know you were
Oh,
adopted
only the
except
family that we didn't talk to. My mother broke off from that side of the family many years earlier. And apparently, the way it was described was one day I wasn't there, and the next day she showed up to visit. There's a baby.
so
Wow.
she told them she adopted you, or did she try to fake that she'd had you somehow?
There really wasn't much of a discussion with that family member who I called. However, with my own mother, there was plenty of discussion because I have children. So after
Right.
my wife had a baby, I asked my mother, how on earth did you lose weight so quickly? You literally had pencil arms, and there you are holding me with a cigarette in these pictures.
The
And she
cigarette could
goes,
have been an answer too.
I don't know. But she goes, I don't know. It just seemed that the weight just fell off
Oh my. So the lie continues through your whole.
through my whole life.
So let's go back to that moment where you were told by your relative, you know, you were adopted. She knew you were needed a body part. Why didn't she tell you?
Well,
How
it
did
didn't,
you?
it didn't all sink in at once. At
Mhm.
first, it was what, and then if you would imagine, I'm already very sick. I'm
Ugh.
headed toward dialysis. I had, there was a lot of blood. I mean, this is not a positive thing. Um, and a lot of doom and gloom. And so I'm dealing with a family who thinks they're going to lose their dad,
Mm.
and a job where, in corporate America, you don't tell them you're sick,
That's right.
because you want to get promoted. They don't like to promote sick people. So there's a lot going on.
Plus, you want to keep your health insurance if you're sick.
Yeah. So there was a lot going on, and I worked for a fantastic company. I wasn't concerned about the insurance. I was much more, for years I'd kept it a secret because people look at sick people a different way.
They do.
But it slowly, as it drew out, I was like, oh my gosh, this person knew I would need a kidney one day. This person watched me in a study at Mayo Clinic where I was traveling the world, and yet I was taking these meds and flying through Rochester, leaving crying with gigantic amounts of test medicine, and knew I was the only married child with children who were going to lose their kids. And this person was willing to keep it a secret. And then much later, as it continued to unfurl and I figured out who I was, and here I am now, I found out who drove me home from the hospital. I spoke with her husband.
This was your biological mother drove you home?
No. This was when my mother, my adoptive mother, drove me home from the hospital. She was accompanied by someone. And that person wasn't alive, but her husband was. And he remembered my coming home from the hospital. So they had seen me visiting with my family in Hawaii. They joined and they begged my mother, do you not understand? He will need an organ.
Oh my.
It is and they were both lawyers, by the way. You must tell him it is like morally correct. You've got to tell him he's adopted, so at least he has a chance.
Yes.
And she refused and threatened to sue them if they told me.
And if you had known ahead of time, would you have gotten so sick?
Yes. In the end, you don't go up to a stranger and ask for a kidney.
That's right. It's a long,
and there was a family member who I'm not related to as blood, but we thought we were distant cousins, who was young and frankly wanted to give me a kidney. And I just immediately refused. Because she's young and had her life ahead of her.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't like Mr. Noble. It's just the right thing to do. And so in the end, yes, it would have been good to know if I was adopted. You can't imagine going through things like having medical devices put down your throat under anesthetic because your father died of pancreatic cancer and you thought he was your father. And your mother let you go through these medical procedures knowing that you were looking for pancreatic cancer.
It's just
okay. Or you're at Mayo Clinic and they're doing the questionnaires and they go family history.
Yeah, and you're filling it in.
You're filling it in because you think they're your family.
Like Sarah and I have always known we're adopted, so we always write, unknown history. They start from there.
Yeah. So
you're not filling in the other.
Yeah. This person was making life and death decisions for me.
It's just.
How was your relationship with her growing up? And this is sort of a two-pronged question. One is, one of our themes that we have been talking about in this podcast is that a sense of abandonment, that even if you didn't know, that you kind of lived with adoptees in their whole life, or some sort of missing, something that felt missing. So I want to know if you had those feelings, number one. Number two, how was your relationship with your mom?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll remember both of those points. What is interesting is as you go through these major life experiences, is you join communities you didn't know you were a part of, and then you learn about those communities and what many of them have felt. And as we go through this interview, if there's any time, it includes the community of folks that had some sort of abuse. And to answer the first question, my relationship with my mother, who raised me, my adoptive mother, wasn't optimal.
Mm-hmm.
And there were things that she did and said that were abusive to the point where I would question, and it would race through my head, how could someone treat their own flesh and blood in this way? And this is someone who did not come to my wedding. This is someone who locked me under the house when I was 3 in a crawl space. This is someone who, when my first child was born, my son said, I said, don't you want to come see your grandchild? And she goes, we'll come visit when it looks like a baby.
And that's wonderful because she raised a baby. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry
So,
that you went
you
through
know,
that. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm here.
You are you are
I'm
here. You have great
here.
you
And
have
here
great
you are,
humor.
and
You
here you
know,
are, you've raised 2 kids who are graduating college. Aren't
oh
both of
yeah.
them? Or, that is just,
And we hug. We all love
And,
we love each
aw.
other. We are
and you have,
excited to be around each other. Yeah, so there's that. So the relationship was suboptimal. It certainly could have been better. In the end, my wife and I agreed, why would you even get on a plane and fly in to get abused? Why not
Right.
just
There's
stay
a
home?
point where you don't
So
need
my
that.
wife never came to visit again after a certain point. So there's that. And you mentioned the abandonment thing. You know
or
what's
the that was the wrong,
It's okay. It's okay
it
because it's
more just a sense of
not
lack,
belonging.
longing,
Yes.
not belonging, not
belonging.
Yeah.
fitting in. Yeah.
There it was, natively there. It was very strange. And part of my case, part of what happened with me was, if you were to look up the Franzak stolen baby case, when I found out I was adopted at the same time Barbara Walters was doing this thing on a baby who had been stolen and returned to his family. And the FBI got involved thinking I might be that stolen baby. It became filled with intrigue because the FBI didn't want to get caught in the news releasing that they knew they delivered the wrong baby to this family in 1967, saying, this is your baby. So anybody who watches Paul's case, Paul and I are friends now after everything we went through, because there was this 2020 episode I was on.
Wow.
But right from the beginning, there's something that was missing.
Yeah.
And I've been told by a therapist, that there's this, I probably didn't get this lie the baby on the mother's stomach or breast after the baby's born. In the 60s, they would simply take you out and bring you to the next room.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a mixture of hormones and proteins, I believe, that you get when you're born that I know I didn't get. So
Yeah.
from the beginning, even though my birth mother was doing her best, I mean, hell, she was in college, so she was doing her best, I knew I wasn't wholly wanted by this woman.
Yes. Well, it's very I mean, it's so layered, this whole thing, because when you
Yeah.
found out you were adopted, you're going through all these medical proceedings and you're in a terrible time in your life, and then all of a sudden there's probably a sense of like, wait a second, this lines up.
It did.
Yeah.
It was oh, okay, well, this is okay then.
Well, this makes
Like
sense.
some of it was like, oh, okay, no, I can see, okay, you were basically, your husband died when you were when the babies were 3 and 4, and now you are stuck, a good-looking broad with a neat accent from out of the country, and you're stuck raising these babies that maybe you didn't completely want. That would truly suck.
So you had a sibling. Was your sibling also adopted?
He was, and he and I no longer speak.
Okay.
There was a dynamic in the family of, if mom wanted to be mad at or abuse child A or child B, then child A or child B was now going to be the victim.
And the other one was brought
I
on
was
board.
the victim, and I was always the victim. And once my mother was gone, then the person I was raised with chose that they were going to continue on with verbal abuse and that kind of stuff. And, when you are dying, when you're fatally ill, getting abusive texts and phone calls, pretty easy to just turn off.
Yeah.
But since I lived, I don't like that in my life.
I like that you found it out only because you had this past, and now you can be like, okay,
I'm free.
I'm free. Those aren't my people. I mean, literally.
I'm free. I'm free.
Yeah.
And I'm actually quite happy.
Yeah.
I'm just,
And you have a wonderful family, and you're a wonderful father, and you love your wife. I mean,
well, that's
you've,
nice.
but you've,
Let's call them.
let's call, let's get them on and see how this is
Yeah,
going.
my son does voiceovers. He'd sound great on this podcast.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Uh, coming up, I mean, we know you have a biological brother, and I want to get to that, but I want to kind of finish the piece of your past. What was your father's role in all this? Your adoptive
father.
Yeah.
So my adoptive father, his name was Harold Mosak, and he was a Chicago hero. He had saved people from a burning building.
Wow.
He had been in World War II. He was a doctor, and he was, even though he died when I was 3, I'll try not to get emotional here. He was my sole memory of what unconditional love and safety feels like for a child.
Mm.
And because I had that, that was the hook. That is something that helped me even when I was on my deathbed in my 50s. He was I recall that, I remember it. And it's not just baby pictures. You can remember, like I remember standing on the hospital steps. He had pancreatic cancer, and I remember the nurse and her wearing her mask, walking up to my mother and whispering something in her ear quietly, and us turning around and walking away. And we were there to go visit him, and we didn't get to see him.
And
So,
did your mother handle that, telling you of his death in a graceful way, or?
yes, it wasn't like she wasn't completely Cruella de Vil. She was close. No, most of the time the puppies did not have their spots, and it was not okay. But in this particular case, when Dad died, she told us that he was such a good doctor that God needed a good doctor for all the babies in heaven.
Oh.
And while that sounds lovely, that sure puts you in a situation where God must be really mean.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
God's picking and choosing these good people.
So how do you explain to a 3-year-old, you will never, the one protector who truly loved you is now gone. And this big creature in the sky took him away.
And did things get worse after your father was gone?
It did.
Father?
It was that, excuse my language if I'm offending anyone, but it was that oh shit moment. And I like a light switch. Oh shit, I'm on my own with this lady.
Yeah.
And she likes my brother better.
Was your brother older or younger?
15 months older.
Okay.
Oh, and close in age. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then your mom remarried a couple times.
Well, yes, there were 4 marriages. Don't need to go into all the detail, but the final one, the last name was Miller, and first name was the same as mine. So I became a junior.
And how old were you when that
I was
happened?
11 when she remarried.
Wow.
And changed your name?
Yes.
Huh.
He adopted us. And
so you were twice adopted.
She wanted
you were twice adopted.
She wanted a father for her children.
I mean, in that era, you can understand it. That was really all the choices women had.
No, exactly. It's not just choices. It's, who are
there was no choice. Yeah.
Who are you raised to be, and what do you think you are? You are a woman, and therefore you've got to be this.
Yes.
Safety.
Security. And
the mother who raised me, she was brilliant. A brilliant lady, a dietitian, went to Duke.
Wow.
So, in many cases, like one of the conclusions I'd like to reach, even when we're talking about adoption, is I'm now a DNA expert, because I figured out all the DNA on my own after 18 months. And I can tell you that we are somewhat our DNA, but and it's my own belief, we are our spirit. We are, in fact, somebody who is not our DNA.
Mhm.
And in this life, if you have the opportunity to make some decisions, you are the result of your decisions and experiences.
Yeah,
And
I'm a
so,
big believer in the spiritual part of that, and it's the nature nurture part too. You are born with certain things, but then you are who you are from the minute you're born. You have a certain essence
yeah,
and personality, and
yeah.
you come into the world with gifts to give or whatever to, you know.
Hmm.
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
This is what, and can we go to the part? Okay, so now you know you're adopted.
Yeah, now I know I'm adopted. So the first thing, of course, one would
Yep.
logically do is mix martinis, dress in drag.
Well, that's of course.
I dressed in drag and put
Excellent.
out pictures on my Caring Bridge that said, if you see a woman who looks like this, do not be alarmed. Call me right away. So I sent those pictures out. People were like, oh, you're crazy. I'm like, what would you do?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean,
you explain this one. And so some friends, some on a friend on the West Coast and the East Coast happened to be watching this 2020 episode that Barbara Walters was doing about this stolen baby. And they saw, of course, Crazy Sam in drag. And my wife had a great idea. One of them was in blonde with pigtails in case she dyed her hair blonde and moved to Sweden and
oh
married
God, it's
someone rich. So I
awesome.
was
I
wearing
mean,
my fur coat. I have a gigantic, obnoxious fur coat. Anyway, we posted those pictures. My friends watched this episode. They do a age progressed picture of what this stolen baby would look like today.
you
If you
sent
want,
us that.
if
Yes.
yeah, and one of them called the FBI and said, we got your kid. And the other one called me going, oh my God, you have to watch this. And I'm like, I'll shout out to Wendy. Crazy Wendy said we have to watch this, so let's watch it. So we're all around the table and I'm like putting it on the screen at the kitchen table, and every fork dropped at the same time. We all sat there going, what?
Oh my God.
Because I'm like, what is this? Because the state of Illinois had told me, like I called them trying to figure out who I was. And they go, oh, it's going to be months before we get you your original birth certificate. So you'll have to wait. And I'm like, I could be dead by then. So please put a rush on it. And meanwhile, up pops this picture and I'm going, I have no idea what's going on. But at this point, we're living in, like a Far Side
Oh,
cartoon.
you
Or,
think you're, yes, I
just
can even
ridiculous,
imagine.
and
Did the
so
did the wrong year jump out at you at all? Like, wasn't the baby a
it
different
was the right
year?
year.
Oh, it was the right year.
Oh, it was like, if you know someone who was born
Oh my God.
in, you know, like I think April 1964, that kind of thing, who looks like this, who doesn't
God.
know who they are, call the FBI immediately.
That's insane.
You know, and
How did you become friends with the baby who was
oh,
stolen?
well, this is kind of neat. Paul is a really just straightforward guy. And the FBI actually thought there was a pretty good chance that I was this baby, because what I didn't know is that they knew in their own records that they had turned in, they were like, a baby needs a home. Here's a home without the baby. The ears look close enough because
Oh
there was
my
no such thing as
goodness.
DNA. Let's drop the baby off. We're pretty sure it's not it, but we'll tell him, And so his mother goes, it's my baby. And she raises him, and the
Oh
boy
my
ends up
God.
looking like a runway model, while the rest of the family looks like Danny DeVito, and he's looking around going, and so they age progress the baby. I look like the stolen baby. And so Paul and I had a conversation. And the conversation was immediately, look, I don't want to mess with your family. This has been so much trauma for your mother already. If I happen to be their baby, let's figure this out quickly and put everybody out of our agony.
Yeah.
Because just because, and the FBI took my DNA and lost it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And so that's, and all the DNA companies contacted me because they wanted to see if they found families so they could do an ad.
Oh yeah,
So
I'm
I ended
sure.
up in all the DNA databases without even caring. Like I didn't care about Facebook either, but I
No.
went on Facebook going, hey everyone, do you have a body part? It's me. I'm on social media.
It's me. I might be related
Stolen
to you.
baby now needs a kidney.
Yeah, stolen. That is literally it. Now it's not stolen baby. Live. So it was, the whole thing was humorous, and I
And
guess maybe in some cases a healthy diversion, but just a part of the collateral damage at the time
yeah, so
in the
much.
journey. It was a lot to
That
look
is
back on.
just
That's why, thank God you have humor. I mean, if you didn't have humor to
Well, my wife did too. Literally the first words out of her mouth were, "Well, thank God my children aren't related to that horrible bitch."
it's like your wife.
I'm like,
I
that's
mean,
kind of a
there's-
good point.
there's some blessings in there.
Yes.
I mean, just the whole thing with the special, and you're finding all these things out.
Yeah.
It's just
Well,
insane.
so then all the DNA companies did the DNA for you. Is that then you kind of were like, all right, well, I'll go digging down through
Well,
here.
they did the DNA and everything came back, but there were absolutely no close relatives and a blend of DNA, and you don't know who the father was and who the mother was. So separating out who's who of who's related is kind of hard because they both
We've
shared
talked about
some
that.
common ethnicity, and so, or genetic background, and so you couldn't separate it. And one of the DNA companies, Ancestry, wanted to like lock down my DNA under contract for 6 months, which I did, because I'm like, I could be dead by the time they figure out who I am anyway. So none of it really mattered at the time. I frankly didn't know what God was doing. And I really just kept thinking, this is way too crazy. Something is going on. And at the time, it didn't occur to me how egocentric I was thinking it was about me, to be honest, because I'm like, this whole world is swirling around me. What is going on? And it turns out it was really about everybody. It wasn't just about me, because
So,
the end of the story,
everything aligned.
yeah, it all aligned, but for a lot of people, for the family and everything, it all ended up like, it wasn't about me. There's a bigger picture going on, because at the end of it, here I am, but here are two happy young people who were kids at the time living in trauma. Here's a marriage that started in 1991 with my parents saying it would fail and refused to show up at the wedding. And no, I didn't, marry someone completely crazy. I married a fine person, and so I'm going to my son's graduation. I have a new brother who I'll leave unnamed, who lives here in Dallas now, who's from Australia.
Yes, that was the piece that's
here we are.
That was through Ancestry.
So
he came about.
Yeah. So what happened was, I didn't expect to be here in 2021. And I was doing all the things you're supposed to do, in my opinion, when you're going to drop dead and you're a father. Make sure all the life insurance is paid up.
Yeah.
Meet with my insurance agent. Tell her, hey, so I don't think I'm going to make it. The numbers don't look really great on dialysis. Some people don't do well on dialysis.
Yeah.
And if I drop dead, which I think is on the way, because I had some near-death experiences. So for those who have ever had them, they're not fake. And so I just told her I wasn't going to make it. I was pretty sure. So I was doing all of that. And I'll just go into the kidney for a second. 2 weeks after I met with my State Farm agent to tell her I didn't think I was going to make it, Linda told me she was going to pray. I told her everything's going to work out. This story is too crazy for it not to work out the way it's supposed to work out. So let's just let it be. And this guy walked into her office, and his name is Adrian Serrano. He was interviewing for a job. And at the end of the job interview, told her that God was telling him to give someone a kidney.
It just gave me chills.
And I still have the email from her that started with, "You're not going to believe this, but..."
Oh my.
If you were to look up the odds of matching a kidney.
I've heard a little bit about this.
In your city.
Has to be healthy, has to have the right blood type For me, it had to be one particular blood type. Has to not clash with any of your flesh typing or antigens in your system.
Oh my.
And then has to be in a medicatable zone of at least 6 major proteins. The
And
odds are zero.
yeah. And someone walks in and says this.
Yeah.
He's
Perfect match.
Yeah.
God, that is just.
He's your angel. I mean, that's a
I've
whole.
had no rejection episodes, no nothing. Here I am.
And it's been how many years?
Since 2015.
God.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So there
And do you
was
keep
that.
up with him? Obviously.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, he's my hero.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is a dude who didn't like needles. He got wheeled in and got sliced open and gave a perfect stranger a body part.
He's an amazing man. That's all.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
So here we are, like, you know, and as it's happening, you've been through so much trauma that you're just still, the world was swirling around me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm at this point going, I may or may not live. I have no idea. And I'll tell you, just one of the funny parts is, if anybody ever had any near-death experiences who's listening, when you wake up in the hospital and you go, the hell is this? I'm not supposed to be back.
Oh.
You know, that's kind of what happened. Was the kidney went in, instantly worked. I go home for recovery, and
you were more expecting not to live.
Oh yeah, like this. I mean, the odds of whatever, all of this that had happened, I was already living in some Hitchcock film.
I mean, you
know, but then when you realize, you know, you have major realizations, you know, life-changing experiences, but also then to personally realize that we don't die really affected me profoundly, and still does every morning to this day. You can't unremember it. And so I, about a months later, 2016 is when we met. I get a call from Ancestry going, we had a close family hit. Can we film a dinner? We'll pick it up wherever it is. And my immediate answer was no.
Yeah.
No, I'm crazy. I'm willing to go through Chick-fil-A in drag. Okay.
Right.
God knows what I'm related to.
Right. Right.
So the answer is no.
Right.
But that's how I found my brother. And the DNA specialist from the 2020 episode helped me decrypt how close the relationship was.
So it wasn't a cousin, and it was a brother.
Mm-hmm. It ends up being my half brother.
Wow.
And then suddenly, that's a story in and of itself. It's a book. He's a great guy. I love my brother, and he's joined my family.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's the blessings. That's the
it's quite beautiful. My children, he's 6'1", blonde, Aussie accent, cats, and was at Columbia University at the time.
He's the coolest brother ever.
Yeah. So it's like, and he's 7 years older than my son.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
So I mean, talk about gym shaming. I've gone to the gym with him a couple of times, probably never again, thank you. So there's all of that. So, fast forward to today, we have a family that looks different, with a brother, and frankly, then figuring out that we share a father and finding out who my father was. Now, suddenly, if you're doing DNA, you can separate out the family tree of everybody who's on the father's side.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent the next 18 months doing what law enforcement does when they try to find a criminal from third cousins.
Yes.
So I traced it all the way back to 1850 on both sides and built a tree of 6,000 people and found my birth mother.
Wow. Is she still alive?
She passed away from my kidney disease.
Wow, you're kidding.
And look at that.
No, you're not kidding, but
nope. At the time, they refused her a transplant because not only was it relatively new, but also because they didn't know that people with my genetic disorder, it doesn't flow to the transplanted organ. Nobody knew that information.
So they didn't want to waste a kidney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What year did she die?
Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the years. She was relatively young. It was the early 90s.
Mm. That's and the ancestor. You're right about that, because that's how they got the Golden State Killer, through third
Well,
cousin.
they were using a site called GEDmatch, which is
Yeah.
much more cryptic and like you're going through Excel.
Ah,
But that's I used all 4 of the major DNA sites to build one gigantic tree
that's
from all the
amazing.
DNA.
And
But
is your biological father alive?
everyone's gone.
Everyone's gone.
And
Just you and your brother.
yeah, and my I have a cousin on my mother's side. Fantastic, welcoming people. Once they figured out I wasn't insane, which, you know, 'cause
And
it's
where
a
are
little,
they?
they are all over the country. I've got family in Chicago. Turned out my mother and a lot of my family on my mother's side went to the same exact high school just earlier, where
Oh
I ended up
my.
going.
Wow.
Lovely people.
And
No, just nobody knew I existed.
how were you put up for adoption? Well, now you know that. You said that because she
I
was
was,
young.
you know what, my birth date is wrong as well. I've determined that. So even the birth date on the original birth certificate was somehow falsified. I don't know how they did that one, because that
Or
was
why they did that?
to hide it. It
Huh.
was
Not traceable, maybe.
yeah, my mother, my birth mother falsified her own last name. I know that because it's a mashup of another family name that's part of her tree.
That she put together.
So she falsified as well.
Yeah.
Just
I wonder if
I get it.
if she
Yeah,
hid
me
it.
too.
Maybe she was hiding. Did her
She
parents know?
nobody knew. This is, I mean, she was good. She just refused to come home her freshman year of college for summer. Refused.
Had the baby, then everything's back to normal.
Yeah. And now I know the address was on the original birth certificate was not made up. It happened to be an apartment building near Northwestern University filled with nuns who would take in
these
women
kids
who were pregnant.
Yeah. That's pretty common. I mean, I think that's actually more common than we know, with as stories come out that, you know, women didn't have the options they have now, or society viewed you different and everything was different.
Yeah, it was. And I think she was really damn brave.
Yeah, I do
You know,
too.
this was a lady who marched in civil rights marches, who came from a family who would not have marched.
This is why you have who you are.
That's well, you haven't met my brother.
Well, he's from your father's side, right? So, briefly, what do you know about your birth father?
He was an author.
Clearly, there was a significant age difference between you and your half brother. So your father had fun for quite some time, I'm guessing.
Gosh, how dirty can I make my language? Dad was busy. He was a published author. And we most recently found out very privately that he was aware that he had gotten someone pregnant. We didn't know that part. I don't know if he was aware I was born. However, I've even been in contact with the university where he went, and out of medical necessity, which frankly was a lie, I got his grades and found out that he ended up on the East Coast 2 months after I was born in a different school.
Sort of took off. Yeah.
So, and then he ended up living in Sydney.
Hence, then you have the younger half brother.
That's right.
What's your
6'1"
brother
with tattoos?
Fitting image.
What's your brother's name?
Oh, you don't want to say?
Well, you have different last names now.
We'll save it for the book.
Okay. No, I was just curious if he had a cool name, like he's so cool.
No, it's not like, Moon Unit or anything.
Right.
No, he's named after my birth father's brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Sam,
you're,
this has just
yeah.
been incredible. I mean,
and I want to take like another 2 hours and delve in.
Yeah.
I
But in-
know.
you know, it's some of it is humorous, and yes, I injected a lot of humor into it. And frankly, anybody who's fatally ill, if you
Yeah.
don't go into it with humor, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
I mean, and I went really into the gallows humor. I was the guy with fake cockroaches in dialysis, a
Aw.
remote control fart machine, and fake,
I love those
fake
remote
vampire
control fart
blood.
machines.
Okay. I did the thing where I poured the fake blood down
I
my
love
arm
it.
and had it trickling on the floor to frighten the nurses. I was very bad, but
No, it's
the-
wonderful. My mom went through a lot with her health, and there was people that she would know like this who would just make her day. It
yeah,
just,
you just gotta, you got to
yes.
go out, at least go out laughing.
Yes.
But the moral of the story, two different pieces of it. You are who, if you have those freedoms or give yourself those freedoms, you are who you decide to be.
Mm.
And if you decide you can accomplish something or be somebody, bake it till you make it. You might get there, but it's really up to you. And the adoption thing, you know, here I am. Is there a winner or a loser? I really don't know. I don't know what the equation is, but
Mhm.
I am delighted to have the family I do now. And I'm elated to have this fantastic brother, and I have my health. I wake up in the morning still surprised.
I
So
love it.
it's all good.
I love that you decide who you're going to be. I love that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I
Yeah.
can't wait for the book.
Well, I appreciate that you're giving adopted people a voice, because that is a community. And
is.
sometimes you don't find out until right at the end that you're a part of that community. But you know, we share some things in common. There's something that we know that
Yes.
we're not completely connected, and yet we are. Yet we
Yeah.
are. When we have fantastic parents, these
Yeah.
are wonderful people. In some cases, it makes them all the better. They took in someone who wasn't their flesh and blood
Yeah.
and loved them with all their hearts.
That's how Sarah and I feel about our families. And oh, makes me cry. You're awesome. It's so true.
This has just been such a delight to have you on. And I wish we could talk forever. I mean, there's so many more deeper questions, like knowing your story even more, that I want to even delve more into.
Well, there's a lot of really current stuff going on, like what's happening in Israel, because my brother's relatively connected to the experience going on there. Let's just leave it at that. And I met him over there because I figured I had no right to an opinion unless I put my feet there and looked around for myself. So when they're bombing Tel Aviv, not only is there a song about it that was being played in the clubs at the time when I was there, but I know the other side of the story as well. So I learned all of that simply because I have the brother I have.
Yeah.
Never know where your journey takes you guys.
You
It never
definitely
does.
don't.
And we may, if we can do a panel or something, we may have you back at some time if you'd be open to that. So
Happy to. Thank you so much.
you're
for inviting me.
wonderful.
I'm so happy you're healthy now. What a great ending, and congratulations to you and your wife and your son.
Yes.
And daughter.
And daughter, who has her own little radio show at Texas A&M.
Oh, she does.
Yeah.
Is she graduating this year or next year?
She's got a couple more years.
Okay.
And I think the show's called Monster of the Week.
Oh, I love it.
Texas A&M. Yep.
We'll have to check that out.
We'll definitely look for it.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Sam,
thank you
really for your time. This has just been fantastic.
You guys have a nice evening.
Thank you. You too.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.